Hello, everybody. We are going to be discussing some of the islands of Oceania today, the Pacific Islands. You have a note sheet, which will be linked over on the other side from where this video is linked. Hopefully, you found that and put it in your shared folder in under Unit 4, Oceania. And we've already talked about Australia and we've talked about New Zealand. And the islands of the rest of Oceania, the Pacific Islands, generally are much different. These were not really colonized too much by Europeans, so most of the people that you're going to find on these islands um, are going to be the descendants of the native people or are the native people, and so we'll discuss that a little bit. They are generally poorer islands. They're not as civilized. They're not as modernized, and there's a little less infrastructure. And so this is kind of what Oceania looks like. We're talking about 3.3 million square miles of Pacific Islands out here. All these islands. Anytime you really watch a movie or a TV show where people get stranded on a deserted island, it's usually in the Pacific because there's so much out there that you can't find it. Maybe you've seen like the Tom Hanks movie Castaway. He's stuck out here, right? And they just can't find them because there's so many little tiny islands, millions and millions of islands, 3.3 million square miles, the 48 continental United States, not Alaska and Hawaii. If you measure that, that equals about 3.7 million square miles. So you're talking about an area that's almost as large as the entire United States, but it's ocean and tiny islands. The international date line is going to cut right through here. And you notice our international date line, where the day starts and the day ends, is not perfectly straight. Okay? It kind of moves around different islands. And in the past, it's actually moved side to side as certain islands decide, you know what, we want to deal and be on the same day as the United States, or no, we want to be on the same day as Australia or Asia, maybe Japan, China, depending on who they're trading with, or maybe which country, if they're a territory, which country owns them. American Samoa, for instance, is an American territory, but American Samoa decided, you know what, we want to be on the same day as Australia because that's who we do most of our business with. And so they just shifted it over a little bit, and all of a sudden they started the day instead of ended the day. So they no longer really wanted to be on the same day as the west coast of the United States. Nobody knows for sure how many islands are out here. They think there's more than 20,000. I might have said a million on the last one, but more than 20,000. And these Pacific Islands make up Oceania. Now, there's two different types of islands out there. There are high islands and there are low islands. And we'll talk about the difference. Most of the low islands are something called an atoll that we'll look at. And how were they made? These islands were made by volcanoes. And this did not happen overnight. It took many years, millions of years for these islands to be created. So here we can see the difference between the two types of islands. And I know you're all pretty smart, so if you were going to guess which type of island is this, high or low, I'm guessing most of us would guess low island because it's not very high up in the air. And then, of course, the island down here is a high island because it's very high. A lot of low islands many years ago used to be high islands, but they've had weathering and erosion and broken down. And so this someday will be long gone, could turn into that. The high islands tend to have better soil. They can grow more crops. Low islands have poorer soil and rely on fishing. So you're going to see a lot of exotic fruits, vegetables grown in places like this. In the high islands, you might see banana plantations, other types of tropical fruit. So the islands were formed by tectonic plates colliding, volcanoes, lava coming up through the surface. We'll see a picture of that in a little bit. And then there's also coral reefs and atolls. We'll look at that in a little bit, but this is a coral reef surrounding a high island, and it just looks like a tropical island, right? You've got the lighter color blue, that's where it's shallow. You get into that dark area, it's very deep. So here's an atoll. This is a type of low island, and you can see it's almost like a ring, right? Like a donut type island. At one point, this might have been land in here, and it weathered away, and you just had soil pile up on top of the old coral reef, and that's what kind of surrounds it. So here's the theory behind it. Will we ever know this for sure? No, not unless somebody invents a time machine and you can kind of bounce around and take pictures of these things. But this was a theory where you had uh, the old high island that was formed volcano or lava over long periods of time would seep through the cracks and harden, and over long periods of time started poking up above the seawater. And then the volcano becomes dormant, and you have coral reef that pops up around it. And over time, the outside kind of the inside wears away, weathers away, and this is what we're left with. Now, how do you get plants and animals and things like that out to the island? Um, During last ice age, sometimes animals walked out there. People might have walked out there. A lot of these islands do not have people. Sometimes people sailed there. Sometimes big hurricanes could blow seeds and could blow small insects and lizards and small animals out there. And we're not talking about this happening one time. We're talking about long periods of time, hundreds of thousands of years. The people that arrived on a lot of these islands, it was a slow process, but they sailed. We're talking about excellent sailors, like on your movie Moana, I think it's called. Right? She was a good sailor, even though there were haters that were saying she couldn't sail, but she did. Right? I think that's how it goes. Um, so they believed they island hopped in their boats. And you can see the different time periods coming from Southeast Asia over 3,000 years ago, getting to places like Samoa, over 1,000 years ago, getting to places like Tahiti, right? Hawaii, 1250 AD is when people arrived. Here's a look at the boats. Here's one that's recreated. One of the first Europeans to arrive, we've heard about him before, Captain James Cook, British sailor, sailing through here. Had a video link, it won't work on this. We might watch it later, where Magellan sailed through and actually dies in the Pacific trying to get to the East Indies. Climate. Most islands in Oceania have tropical climates and rainforest, so very warm. What they will have to worry about are hurricanes, or typhoons as they're called in that part of the world, and or cyclones, I should say. Typhoons, cyclones. Here, sometimes we'll call a tornado a cyclone. But the big hurricanes, there's not a whole lot of protection in this part of the world. The economy, these are generally poorer countries, less developed countries, very little infrastructure. Life expectancy isn't always as high as in other places in the world. These are probably what we would consider to be stage two countries, as far as they have lots of they have a lot of kids, but they maybe don't live as long. Some places deep in the rainforest are where you're going to find stage one, and people are still living in the Stone Age without any contact with the outside world. You will also find resorts here. And these resorts generally are built by Western companies coming from the Western world, the United States, Europe, Japan, where they will set up a resort. They'll pay the country fees and taxes, but they have these tropical resorts that are generally very expensive. You can look them up online, but some of you may have taken a vacation there. Some of you might go there in the future. Fishing rights of the waters around these places generally help pay a lot of or help fund a lot of these countries. But one of the main types of occupations you'll find here is subsistence farming, where you're only really able to grow enough for yourself, trade a little bit with your neighbors. You don't make a huge profit. You also find subsistence fishing going on. A lot of these places gained their independence in the 1970s, but they still rely on some help from their former colonizers. Fishing is very important. The islands, you own about 200 miles off the coast of your territory. So in the United States, on our east and west coast, down south, Gulf of Mexico, we own about 200 miles. Once you get, or you own about halfway to the other next place, if it's less than 200 miles. Um, Sometimes you reach part of the ocean where you're not within 200 miles of any country. And at that point, you're in uncharted waters. You are in international waters where there's very little laws. So they will sell some of these rights to the big fishing companies. Do you remember the one of the countries that we talked about that does a lot of fishing and brings in a lot of like tuna fish and other marine animals? That's right, Japan. Talked about the tourism and their fancy resorts. In Melanesia, which is a region of Oceania, it's been known for, or for a long time was known for having cannibals. Um, Now, we will see a little link on this later, but some of the last known cannibals or the headhunters live deep in the rainforests of Papua New Guinea here, or on the Indonesia side as well of Papua. And they're deep in the rainforest. They really don't have any contact with the outside world. And people that have gone in and visited with them have found that they don't believe they're eating people, but that they're eating a type of monster that possesses the people. So we'll see that video link later on. In class, I would have shown it to you, but it doesn't work on this. So here are the three regions of the Pacific Islands: Micronesia, Melanesia, and Polynesia. Hawaii, U.S. state, is kind of in that northern part of Polynesia. Micronesia means small islands, Melanesia means dark islands, and Polynesia means many islands. I can hear some kids outside playing. Looks like they're shooting a puck around. They should be doing online learning right now. Melanesia consists of 4 countries and several territories: Vanuatu, Fiji, Solomon Islands, Papua New Guinea. We'll have a video link on that later as well. Here's New Guinea, the island, or Papua New Guinea makes up half of it. Indonesia controls the other half. We talked about this a little bit with in Australia with the Aboriginals, where especially kids oftentimes might have kind of a yellow hair, and this really kind of throws geneticists for a loop. They don't understand it because generally in the world, lighter skinned people might have the blonde hair, the light hair, and darker skinned people with more pigment, whether you're in Eastern Europe, Southern Europe. If you go to Italy, you don't find blonde haired people. If you go to countries in Africa, you don't find blonde haired people. If you go to countries in Asia, you don't find blonde haired people. So this kind of throws people for a geneticists for a loop. And oftentimes it does darken up as they get older in life. So just so you don't see that and think, oh, they're dyeing their hair. Another thing that you'll find in Melanesia is these traditional wooden masks that will be used in ceremonies. If you go, I believe Mrs. Olson has one when she took a trip there in the, or a long time ago. Well, maybe not that long ago, but I think she said it was honeymoon or something. She got married, they went there, and she has one of these masks. I think from Polynesia, though, not Melanesia. Very tropical. Not very good infrastructure. Roads sometimes aren't very good. Airports, that type of thing. But very beautiful, very tropical, right? A lot of us would be like, yeah, it'd be kind of nice to be sitting on a beach right now. That crystal clear water. Here we've got like a market for different fruits and vegetables. Here's Polynesia. Poly, many, right? That's what it means. So Polynesia means many islands. You have over 100 or over 1,000 islands scattered throughout this area. Many are different countries. Some are territories. And then you have Micronesia, which means small islands. Micro, like microscope, microscopic. All right, is a subregion comprising thousands of small islands in the western Pacific Ocean. That would probably be considered a low island. Some U.S. territories in Micronesia that you've heard of. Guam is one. We'll see a video link on that later. If you remember back to modern America or growth of America, we took over Guam during which war? That's right, the Spanish-American War. And then Bikini Atoll, and we'll talk about why Bikini is also famous. The residents of Guam are U.S. citizens, but they cannot vote in federal elections. And here you can see all the U.S. territory, all the water rights that we own, 200 miles off the coasts. So we actually control a lot of that in the Pacific, a lot of military bases. And a lot of our military bases provide a lot of income to the people in those regions as they get jobs working on the base. Obviously, probably not in a military capacity unless they join the U.S. military, which they can. Then they can be sent anywhere. But serving, doing odd jobs, working, could be construction, could be custodial jobs, cooking jobs. But a lot of people are going to be getting those odd jobs, service jobs on the bases. So Bikini Atoll, this was a low island located in the Pacific in Micronesia. And you can see just north or part of the Marshall Islands here, or just north of the Marshall Islands. And during the 1950s and 60s, the United States military starts testing atomic bombs there. And on some of these islands, in Bikini Atoll and other areas, they actually had to move the people that live there off to other islands in the Marshall Islands and said, you can go back in a little bit when it's safe. We're just using this area to test. So this made worldwide news. Now, when we think bikini, you probably think of one or two different things. Some of you are thinking of the swimsuit that was invented in 1947. The inventor, who was a French guy, wanted to give the name of this new swimsuit, a two-piece swimsuit, which was new at the time, a name that people would remember. And since the Bikini Islands were in the news, he called his new suit the Bikini. And there is, hang on, there is the inventor of the bikini. Yeah, there's our testing. And then you also probably think of SpongeBob SquarePants, who lives at Bikini Bottom. But that's where the name came from. It came from this island. And so a lot of testing out there. And one of the issues, and we'll have a reading about it, is people can't go back on some of these islands, Bikini Atoll, because there's still too much radiation left there from the testing. And then lastly, a very famous Polynesian island is Easter Island, located very far out on the far eastern part of Polynesia, getting close to South America. And why is Easter Island so famous? They have the giant stone heads called the moai. All right, and they were carved a long time ago, and there's a lot of mystery about this because the quarry to these heads is located in the center of the island. So how did people without the use of modern technology move these things? And hundreds of years ago, they didn't have the wheel. They didn't. You notice there aren't a ton of trees here. There used to be, but they think the rats and stuff that were brought by the sailors started eating the root systems and things like that. So the trees are all gone. Here's Easter Island. All right, pretty far away from a lot of these islands, getting close to South America. and all these giant statues, thousands of statues out there. And so we will see a video link on how a lot of people think that they moved them. And so that's it for Oceania.